Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
With no further ado, I'm going to introduce Charlie P.
How's everybody doing? I'm Charlie Parker. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. And I'm just setting up shop here. It takes you all a minute to get to work when you get there, doesn't it? Come on. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. How's that sound? Can y'all hear me okay? Because I'm scheduled for throat surgery, so if without a microphone, I got no shot right now. I'm really happy to be here, and my sobriety date is March 22nd of 1985. For that, I am truly grateful. I want to thank anybody that had anything to do with me being here. We were just here 2 weeks ago. Katie and I were here for a business trade show, and I'm still trying to lose those pounds we picked up when we were here. I swear, I come to New Orleans, and I act a fool for about 3 days. I mean, I just eat everything, and then I can't wait to get back. But we got to hang out with Ralph and Felix then, and and I just really like Louisiana AA. I like the people in Louisiana. It's nice to get to visit another country. I swear I come over here and I'm like, this is almost like going international. I just love it. I love the people here, and anybody that had anything to do with putting this thing on, I'm really grateful for. I mean, if you've ever had anything to do with being on a committee on one of these things, there's an awful lot. Did you see the size of the committee on this thing, though? I mean, I was looking on the flyer. There must be 82 people on the committee. But there's a lot of work that goes into putting one of these things on, and I want to thank anybody that had anything to do with that. And if it's like the AA where I come from, there's also a lot of people that didn't do a darn thing. But we got a lot of ideas about how it could have been done just a little bit better, And that's the fellowship I crave, Those are my people there. I want to thank James for being here. Can you hear me all right, James? Because, I don't care. You tell me to stand close to the microphone, I just ain't going to do it. I get worked up and I get moving around. And Jesse told me I need a lavalier, but I'll be running around up here like Garth Brooks with the little thing on. But I don't know. My home group is the primary purpose group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Austin, Texas. We meet on Tuesday nights at 7:30, and if you're ever in Austin, we invite you to come. It truly is the greatest meeting in the world, and we study the Big Book line by line, week after week. And there's a time when that wouldn't have appealed to me that much, but we run about between 200 and 225 people every Tuesday night studying the Big Book. So it's phenomenal. It tells me that I think real alcoholics are hungry for a real solution in this program, and I'm happy to say that I've seen, I think in the last few years, I think Alcoholics Anonymous is making a big comeback in AA. I hope to get to talk about that some. I better get going. I do want to say, that I live in an AA household, and Alcoholics Anonymous is alive and well in our home, and Katie is here with me, and she's the best AA I've ever known, and we're getting to be well represented this weekend. I'm talking this morning, she's talking tonight at 8 o'clock. And then we're doing a workshop on sponsorship at 3:30 this afternoon. And Katie, I'll say it, in front of anybody. She's the best at hearing inventory of anybody I've ever seen, and she sponsors a ton of people, just a ton of people. I'll let her tell you about that. But I pay her cell phone bill, so she sponsors a ton of people. I mean, the car will pull in the garage, and it's an hour before she comes in the house because she's out there finishing up phone calls and stuff. But we love AA. I have a meeting at the house on Thursday nights with my guys, and then she has a meeting on Monday nights at the house. And the other night I was pulling down the street, and there were 28 cars in the street, 45 women in our living room. And if you want to have some fun with Katie, just tell her that there's not enough strong women in AA today, and see what she says. My sponsor is Myers Raymer. Before that, my sponsor was Mark Houston, and those two men have had a key role in changing my life. And I'm going to try to talk about that, but I'm just going to get going. My sponsorship lineage: you always wear a coat and tie when you get behind the podium. I mean, they always said you don't have to. You don't have. I mean, it's okay if you don't want to wear a coat and tie when you get up there. I mean, you still have to wear one, but if you want to do it under protest, that's fine. And it's funny because we were talking out in Oxnard, California, one time, and this guy goes, I said, now if you got to wear a sport coat, if you're gonna read how it works or introduce me and this stuff. And this guy goes, man, he goes, I'm a surfer. He goes, I don't wear a coat. And Katie goes, I'm a fitness professional. You think I'm going to get up there in leotards? I mean, I was proud of that guy too. He went and bought a sport coat at the resale shop for $7, and he looked like $1 million when he got up there. I mean, most of my experience though in a coat and tie before I got to this program, I had one really simple job. All I had to do was stand there and wait for my lawyer to nudge me, and I'd go, no contest, Your Honor. I mean, but we're going to get talking. My purpose when I get up here is to talk about what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I like to start off with a little joke. And some of you may have heard this joke before. I mean, some of you might have even heard me tell it before. But it's a good joke, and I like the way I tell it. So here it comes. So it's about this guy, and he's driving down this little farm to market road, and he sees a sign on this fence post, and it says, "Talking dog for sale." And he can't stand it. He goes up to the door, and he says, "So you got a talking dog for sale?" And the guy says, "Yeah, he's around back." And he goes around back, and this dog is laying there, and he goes, "So you can talk?" And the dog says, "Well, I certainly can." And he goes, "How in the world did that happen?" And the guy says, "Well, the dog says, when I was young, I started picking up some language skills. And as I got older, I started developing the nuances of the language, started picking up slang and colloquialisms and that sort of thing." And he said, it's really made for an amazing life for me. He said, "I had a 19-year career with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I was able to infiltrate some situations that no human agent would have ever been able to get into. And I've eaten in some of the world's finest restaurants. I've stayed in some of the greatest hotels in the world." He said, "But really more interesting than that is that some of my pups have developed foreign language skills and have become international diplomats. I have 2 pups working in the United Nations right now." And the guy says, "My God," he says, "it's just been fascinating talking to you." And he goes back up front where that old farmer's sitting there on the front porch, and he goes, "How much do you want for a dog like that?" And the guy goes, "I don't know, $40? And he goes, "Why would you sell a fantastic dog like that for $40? And the guy goes, "None of that crap he told you is true." It's kind of like that around here. It doesn't matter how good the story is if it's not coming out of my own experience, So I'm going to try to stick to my own experience, but I'll throw in an opinion here and there. But I'm a big book-based guy. I'm an unapologetic big book thumper. All this is here is a large print copy of the big book that my sponsor took the stories out of the back of it and leather bound for me. It's one of my most prized possessions, and this book like you said there, though you be but one man, when this book in your hand, we believe has all you need to begin. This book doesn't wait long to start making promises to me. I don't like to say I'm a recovered alcoholic without talking about it for a second, because the first promise in this book is right here on the title page of the big book. It says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So already on the title page, the book is saying different stuff to me than what I've been hearing in the meetings for a long time. Most of my career, we got somebody on the kidney transplant list here. I hope it's good news. Yeah. No, I'm gonna try to talk a little bit about it. I'm gonna get to that in a minute. I don't know. I just don't know where we're gonna go. When the book says, this just ain't the right time to talk about it. I got to tell you right now, I got a little ADD working up here, and my brain is liable to go off on bunny trails at any minute. And sometimes you'll hear me say, we're going to get back to that. And what that means is that this is not the right point of the talk to introduce that piece of information, okay? But when I tell you we're going to come back to it, we're probably not coming back, I always get real excited when I actually circle back around to one, But I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I live in Austin, Texas now. I grew up in Dallas in a pretty normal family. I mean, I don't know what normal is. I don't know what dysfunctional is, but I know that the family worked pretty well. And I've heard enough fifth steps over the years to know that a lot of people had it just one heck of a lot worse than I had it growing up. I grew up in a pretty normal family. My dad was a salesman. My mother was a school teacher for 42 years, first grade school teacher for 42 years. I was really well prepared for the first grade. I kind of kicked butt. First grade was strong for me. I did. Anybody else grow up under the burden of potential? Anybody? Oh, that's all I heard about when I was growing up was, why can't you live up to your potential? Why can't you be more like Charles Moliere across the street? And that sort of thing. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind, Mother, but I'm really not holding back that much. This is you're kind of getting my best shot here. I did one before I go any further. Are the guys from Gateway here? Where's my guys from Gateway? Any of you? Nobody. Oh, wait till I talk to them out by the pool. There was 5 of them told me they were coming this morning. Well, anyway, I love the treatment centers. I love new guys. Just to get a feel for the room, how many people in the room have less than a year of sobriety? Welcome. All right. I don't care whether somebody's been in AA for 27 years or 27 months or 27 days. The one thing I can tell you if you're new is that everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous has had day one. We all know what it's like to get here not knowing how to get through a day without drinking. And I've discovered something here that I'm real excited to get up here and talk about. But, I had a lot of that potential stuff growing up, and I did have a sister. I had a sister that's 5.5 years older than me that was perfect. She was National Honor Society. She was drum majorette. She was first chair flautist in the Delhi Symphony Orchestra. And then this kind of thuggish little brother, so there was a lot of that pressure growing up and that sort of thing. But, I didn't start drinking. I drank, I guess, when I was 13, but I didn't really start drinking until I was 16. I got drunk, I think, at 13. I don't know. There's a couple of memories I have. But when I really started drinking, I was 16. And, I'm sober 28 years. I came in the mid-'80s. Back then, I've been in AA half my life, and back in the mid-'80s, 16 was kind of young to start drinking. It was considered kind of young. Now it's not even young to stop, you know. I mean, you got people coming in to get something. I mean, I ain't busted on anybody. I got much love for young people in AA, but I mean, for me, I started drinking when I was 16, and I probably didn't need this program until I was about 17, you know. So I had a pretty good year of controlled drinking there for a minute, but I mean, I'm a big believer in singleness of purpose. AA is a one-trick pony. AA is about alcoholics working with alcoholics, and I don't talk much about outside issues from the podium because it's an interesting topic. I don't like to talk about it without talking about what it means a little bit, because when I came in, there was a group that wouldn't let you talk about drugs at this club, and that's all we heard was you can't talk about drugs at Northland. And so everybody hated Northland, and nobody was talking about singleness of purpose or why we do it or that sort of thing. So I'd just like to take a second to talk about, in fact, it talks about, on page 18, it talks about how we will go in and lie to a counselor, a doctor, psychiatrist. You know, I think we got to be the only group of people that would make an appointment, pay a psychiatrist $175 an hour, and go in and lie to him the whole time, you know? I mean, because if I go in there and he goes, do you drink? I'm going to go, well, yeah, I mean, you know, a couple of beers, you know, maybe if I'm mowing the grass or something. I mean, like I've mowed the grass lately, you know, I mean, I'm not going to go in there and tell him, well, I like to get up in the morning, scuffle up enough money to get a case of beer and a half gallon of vodka. And then, you know, that gets me on a good start for the day. But it says on this, not only do we lie to doctors, it says, strangely enough, wives, parents, and close friends find us even more unapproachable than do the doctors and the psychiatrists. But it goes on in squiggly writing to say, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who's properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Here's the key part of that. It says, until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. What did he say? He said, until that identification that takes place of one drunk talking to another one, until that understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That identification of one drunk, AA has always been about one drunk talking to another one, just like and that identification is so important that out of all the 12-step programs that are out there, and believe me, there's a bunch of them. You know, there's Gamblers Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous, and I even heard there's a Lip Balm Addicts Anonymous out there, you know, in case anybody's ever suffered from that heartbreaking malady, you know. But I swear every time you do that, you have somebody going, oh, I feel you, brother. You know, I can't leave home without my pockets packed with chapstick. But the only difference out of any of those 12-step fellowships is the first part of the first step and the middle part of the 12-step. What I'm powerless over and who I carry the message to. That identification is so important that otherwise we'd all meet in the same room. You know, I don't believe that it's all one disease and one solution. And you know, there's a lot to be said about that identification, but, you know, a lot of times it's most obvious is when it's not there, you know, because most of us, by the time we get to AA, it's not the first time the subject of my drinking has been brought up. You know, would you agree with that? You know, but it was always people that didn't understand the way I drank or why I drank, you know. AA was the first time I'd ever been around a place where somebody that drank like I did, and I could tell it from an energy level, you know, had quit. And, you know, but when I was in treatment at Christmas time, and back in '83. And Christmas Day, we got this big Christmas dinner. I mean, and I'm a big boy now, but I was 292 when I sobered up. And so the reason I say this is because I was pretty interested in this Christmas dinner, and we were just getting ready to sit down. I had the plate with the whole load on it, you know. I mean, like I was going to the electric chair the next day, you know. I mean, and I'm sitting down, and right when I sit down, the doors to the room open up, and in walks about 5 people from one of the local churches, and they've come to sing Christmas carols to us heathen alcoholics, right? you can imagine my excitement, right? I mean, and but I'm watching this woman, and she comes in, and she leans over, and she says something to this guy, and then she leans over, and she says something to this guy, and she leans over, and she says something to this lady, and I can tell she's working her way to me, and when she gets to me, she leans down, and she says, "Are you a patient here?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she goes, "I know exactly what you're going through." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yes. I was once addicted to caffeine." And I'm like, "Oh, ain't that a bitch?" I mean, let me ask you: Did you ever pawn your mom's sterling silver to get a can of Folgers? I mean, did you ever lock yourself in a Motel 6 with some Nescafe? I mean, bless her heart, she was trying to identify, but it just wasn't there, And I mean, but on the other hand, that identification, when I get around somebody like Ralph or Ray or Felix, for God's sake, I'm afraid I could still get in trouble with Felix, but I mean, you can feel, we feel each other. Like Katie and I are very fortunate. We get to go around to a lot of conferences. We get to talk a good deal, and they'll always send somebody to pick you up at the airport. I've never been quite this close to the airport, but I was like, why didn't you tell me? We could have had the porter bring us over here. But whenever they send somebody to pick you up, it's funny because they always call you on the phone. You talk a little bit, and then they'll go, "No, listen, I'm about 5'10". I go, "Don't even tell me. Don't even tell me. This is a little game I like to play. Just be in baggage claim." And I mean, we got their phone number and stuff, but it is amazing how many times you get on that escalator and it comes down the deal, and when it comes down in the room, you look around the crowd of people and you go, "There's our boy right there." I mean, because we can feel each other on an energy level. Big City and I could have gotten in a lot of trouble. I mean, oh my God, good job last night, by the way, Henry. Yeah, that was that identification. So the reason I talk about singleness of purpose, this was not the short version of my little chuck, but it's important because I didn't hear about singleness of purpose till I'd been around over 15 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. The reason we talk about it is not because we're trying to keep the dope fiend out of our lily white Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. We're hoping that whatever this person's malady is, our job is to be able to help him figure out what it is, and we want him to find a room that he identifies in as much as I identify in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because it says right there on page 18 in our book, until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So when we talk about it, I'm going to keep going, but when we talk about being recovered, because, when I started drinking at about 17, somewhere along the line, I crossed the line. I crossed this invisible line of being, I started, early on, I mean, I love where the book says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Any argument on that one? I mean, I think it's a little understated, I like banana pudding, I kind of like those grilled oysters over at Drago's yesterday, but I'm not going to lock myself in a motel room with a few dozen of them. I love the effect produced by alcohol. The first time I got my hands on a drink, I remember thinking, oh, we're going to do this a lot, because I'd been needing a drink for a while when I got my hands on one. Because it treated something in me. But I started getting in trouble, and it started doing things. So, but turns out that trouble ain't what makes me an alcoholic, Going to jail, getting DWIs, having girlfriends move out, losing houses, wrecking cars. That's stuff that happens to people that drink a lot, but it's not what makes me an alcoholic. So when I talk about what makes me an alcoholic, there's two things that our book does a beautiful job of describing in the doctor's opinion in the first 43 pages of the book. And it talks about what does it mean to be an alcoholic. This is important information to know if you're new or fairly new, or if you're going to carry the message to a new guy. I need to be able to give him what I call a fatal dose of alcoholism. Because we sit down and I tell there's two problems with alcohol. I only really have two problems with alcohol. One happens to me when I drink it. One happens to me when I don't drink it. Other than that, I really don't struggle with alcohol. It's just when I'm drinking it and when I'm not drinking it. And the first thing we talk about is what happens when I drink it. The book calls it the physical reaction. It's this phenomenon of craving. It's a physical reaction to alcohol that ain't regular. When I take a drink, something happens that ain't regular. It doesn't happen to my sister. It doesn't happen to 90% of the population. Only about 10% of the population even has the potential to become alcoholic, right? And it's this physical reaction, and the book calls it a phenomenon of craving. The way my allergy to alcohol shows up is in this craving, and I never knew that I was triggering a phenomenon of craving. We didn't talk like that when on my way here. I don't ever remember wandering in the Spillway pub there in East Dallas and going, "Oh, Bobby, 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 God almighty, spiritual malady is on me today." You know? And I had a beer on the way over here, and it has triggered a phenomenon of craving. It's just, I just go in and order a drink. But what would happen was when I drink, it triggers a craving for more drinking. No matter what my plan is going in, if I take a drink or two, I'm about drinking. And I never thought I'd trigger this craving. I thought I just changed my mind, right? Anybody ever go in just to have a couple of drinks? I'm just going to go in. I'm going to settle my tab. I'm just going to have a couple. I'm not going to do like I did last time. I'm not going to burn it down. I'm not going to blow the whole paycheck. I'm just going to have a couple of drinks and then go home. And then I'd get in there. I didn't know I triggered this craving. I thought I just changed my mind. You know, when they say, "Listen, we're going to go," and I go, "I'm gonna stay here, guys. Y'all go. I'm gonna blow my whole paycheck." Looking back. So anyway, the book does a beautiful job of describing this in the doctor's opinion and the first 23 pages of the book. It talks about the physical reaction. It's a big problem. What's your name? Imagine though if we brought Rob in here. If our biggest problem was what happens to you when you're drinking, what would his solution be? Don't drink, right? I mean, if my biggest problem is what happens to me when I drink vodka, my answer would be, don't drink vodka, right? You know, like when you say, "Doc, it hurts when I do this," and the doctor says, "Well, don't do that." I like the one about the 80. This has nothing to do with anything, but I like the one about the 84-year-old man that goes into the doctor and he says, I can't pee. And the doctor says, "How old are you?" He says, "I'm 84. And the doctor says, "You've peed enough." Hey, I'm heading that way, But this physical reaction is a big problem, but it's not my biggest problem. Because my biggest problem is what happens, and it happens on page 23, where it says, "These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion." Right? My biggest problem is that when I get sober, I get so uncomfortable that I eventually need relief. And when I need relief, I can't think about consequences. I can't think about what happened the last time I got drunk. I can't think about what's going to happen if I get drunk. It's not part of alcoholism. I can think about it sometimes, but on page 24, it says we cross this line where I pass into the state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. You guys know, some of you, even the brand new guys, know what the only requirement for membership is. And what's the only requirement for membership in AA? A desire to stop drinking will get me a front row seat in any AA meeting in the world. But it says right there on page 24, it won't do a darn thing to keep me sober. It says we pass into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. And it's because of this thing, it says I've lost the power of choice in drink. My so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. I am unable at certain times to bring into my consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. I'm without defense against the first drink. This is what we're talking about recovering from. In the foreword to the first edition, it says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are 100 men and women, more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." That's this thing we're talking about, is I got a body that can't drink successfully, and I got a mind that's always going to convince me to take another run at it. And that's this terrible cycle that the book is talking about, because when that's fully established in a guy like me, I'm going to drink, And when I drink, I trigger that craving, and I'm drinking until eventually I have to stop or I get stopped. And then I get sober, and I stay sober until I get so uncomfortable that I have to drink again. That's the terrible cycle, is I drink until I have to stop, and I stop until I have to drink. And it says this is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. I told Jesse came over after the storm to Austin, and I was fortunate enough to meet him when he was in treatment, and got to sponsor him through the steps. And he said that's the first thing I told him when we were sitting down was, I said, Jesse, there's no good news in step one. There's really no happy ending to step one. This would be a really rotten program if we brought you in and said, okay, Jesse, here's the deal. You got a body that can't drink successfully. Right? Every time you drink, it's going to get away from you, and you're going to drink more than you meant to, and you're not going to be able to say when you're going to stop or how much you're going to drink. You also, that's bad, but it's not the worst part. You also got a mind that's going to get you loaded every time. Really sorry. Try to have a nice day. But there's a reason that our book spends the doctor's opinion and 43 pages of the big book laying that down, is because step one drives everything. When we talk about it, after I've been drinking for a while, I started getting kind of sloppy. I was a blackout drinker. I drank a lot. I drank a lot. I always say the shortest version, this is the most I'm going to talk about my drinking, but I always say that the guys that I drank with thought I was doing way too many outside issues, and the guys I was doing outside issues with were shocked by my drinking. So everybody thought I was getting a little bit too loaded. But for me, it was really all one event. But I was a huge drinker. I probably still love vodka more than most people that are out there drinking it today. It was a good friend of mine for a long time. But what happened was it started getting sloppy. One night I left a bar in a blackout, and I wrecked the car I was driving. Katie thinks it's an important part of the story to say that this was my mother's car. I really felt Henry when he was talking about, I should tell you that like Henry, I was so poorly treated as a child that I finally ran away from home for good at the age of 28. I'm serious. Never went back. I just loved it because I loved it because I can tell right now I can hang out with Henry, but I just love the delusion we show up here with. Is that I show up here and I think I'm pretty much gangster, and then you go, where are you staying? Oh, I stay at my mother's house. Like any other good gangster. I'm back at home, but I'm leaving, and I wrecked every car my mother ever owned, except for the Honda Civic. And it took me a while to remember that. I was like, the Civic. I never wrecked that Honda Civic. But I wrecked 6 cars of hers, and I don't know why she kept giving me the keys to them. But this night, I'd had 5 Long Island teas, and turns out that's one too many. Or maybe half of one too many, but I leave this bar and there's an impact, and it's one of those nights where you couldn't see a very wide area, and everything out here was real fuzzy, but I could see that fender sticking up, but I'm still rolling, and I keep my foot on the gas, and I get around the corner, and I grab my shoes. For some reason, my shoes were in the passenger side, and I go running. Hey, listen, if you have a cell phone, or a pager or an ankle bracelet, go ahead and turn it off at this time. I said that at Primary Purpose Group one time, and this guy sitting right over here goes, you know how to turn off the ankle bracelet? I was like, that's my people right there, But I grab my shoes and I go running back towards the bar to report the car stolen, and And I got to tell you, this is not an extraordinary night in the life of Charlie Parker. This is just a weeknight, but I'm running back to the bar, and I got my shoes in my hand, and I look over across the street, and there's these two cops standing in the street, and they got this flashlight, and they're shining it on the street, and there's glass everywhere, and it's twinkling in that flashlight. And in my hazy thought, I remember thinking, man, they got here fast. I just drove a half a block, and I'm running back, and they're here. And so I go back and I report the car stolen, and the next morning the police called and they said, Mr. Parker, you're going to have to take a polygraph test before you can pick your car up. I said, why is that? He says, well, it was involved in an accident before it was reported stolen. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, they ran into a parked police car. And I remember thinking, that explains how they got there so fast, because I'd really been hazy on that one, But I don't want to talk too much about drinking, but somewhere along the line, I lost the power of choice and control over drinking. I couldn't choose whether or not I was going to drink, and once I started drinking, I couldn't control how much I was going to drink. And the story I like to tell that illustrates that is I was a big fan of the pawn shops. Any other pawn shoppers out here today? My man, all right. I loved the pawn shops because I just loved the whole equation. It was such a pure transaction. You never went in a pawn shop and the pawnbroker go, "What are you going to do with this money?" Or, "Good God, man, weren't you just in here this morning?" Or nothing. You take in the shotgun and they give you the money. And then you take in the deer rifle and they give you the money. And you take it. Well, and we drunks, we make some good, solid plans. We really do. Ray works over at the college. We make some plans that you could take over there and go, here's my plan. What do you think? And they look it over and go, it's a pretty solid plan, And our plans work right up till they quit working. And my plan on this one was I had 90 days to get everything out of the pawn shop. I'm not selling the stuff. I'm just going to borrow the money and then go back and get it. Now, a key part of this story, though, is that I didn't own very much stuff. So I was having to pawn things that didn't belong to me. That puts a little heat on the equation and causes hard feelings in your family sometimes. But I'm going to get it back, So I'd pawn it, I'd go get it back, I'd pawn it, go get it back. Well, one night I'd pulled this insurance scam, and I had enough to get everything out of the pawn shop, and I stopped by the Spillway Pub to settle my $60 tab, and I was going to go pick up everything from the pawn shop, and I went on a 5-day blackout. I didn't have many of those. I had a lot of blackouts, several a week, but I didn't have many. This was 5 days where I don't remember nothing, And I come out of this blackout, and I'm sitting I hear guys talking about, coming out of a blackout in Vegas with a hot tub and showgirls and stuff. I come out of a blackout on the edge of the bed at my mother's house, and I'm sitting there, and I got $8 left in this pocket, and I still got all those pawn tickets in the other pocket. And we've all had that morning, That's that morning where you just go, oh, no. Oh, my God. Oh, because I shot my wad on that last scam, and now I got nothing left, And my dad was a good man. He worked hard for his money. Nobody was giving him his stuff, and I'm out there pawning it. And I wasn't a sociopath or a psychopath. I knew that was wrong, and I couldn't just let his stuff go to the pawn shop. So I'd have to go to my father and go, Dad, listen up. If we act now, I can get you a pretty good deal on all your stuff, But if we wait till tomorrow, it's strictly retail, And but are there any Al-Anons in the room today? Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Believe me, we know that ain't funny. I have to tell that story like it's a joke to get through it because I remember the desperation of having to go to my dad and tell him that. And the thing about it was, we were in Dallas then, and Dallas is a big spread out town. And it wasn't just go to the pawn shop. Is we need to go down on Garland Road and get your deer rifle, and I left your shotgun over on Buckner Boulevard, and the metal detectors were over on Garland Road, and East Grand is where the sterling silver is, and your coin collection's out in Oak Cliff. And so it was all day in the car with me and my dad and all that shame. And when we'd be driving around, I would be saying, Dad, I swear to God, I will never do this again. And if I was lying to that man, I damn sure didn't know it, because it felt like I meant it with every fiber of my being, that I will never do this again. What I didn't understand that day when we were riding in the truck, and what I've learned coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, is that I didn't have the power to make good on that promise. When I was promising him that I would never do that again, I might as well have promised him that I was going to flap my arms up here and fly around the room, because I did not have the power to make good on that promise. Within 3 days, I'd be hitting his door like a cat burglar, and me and my father made the rounds of the pawn shops 3 times before I got sober. My father eventually wound up in Al-Anon. My mother didn't. My mother is 90 years old and still hasn't made her first mistake yet. She's not against the idea of apologizing for anything. It's just never come up for her. But I mean, she didn't need to go to Al-Anon. She didn't go because she's like, oh no, I had the problem. You quit drinking, we're all good. Now I can still work my mother like a rented mule, But my dad went to Al-Anon. It's a whole other story. It's a great story. But but anyway, that's the kind of stuff that brought me to AA. That point on that jumping off place where it talks about on page 152, where I couldn't imagine life the way I'd been drinking, but I also couldn't imagine not drinking at all. That is a dark spot. That's where I know I can't keep running the way I've been running. But when you're talking about not drinking at all, the reason the book spends the doctor's opinion and the first 43 pages of the book talking about this, and the reason I use a big chunk of my talking about step 1, is because we're not going anywhere until I have that fatal dose of alcoholism, where all of a sudden, and I've seen guys in the treatment center, running this down, and you see them lean forward in their chair, and you can just see them having that step 1 experience where they go, hold on just a minute. Because Clancy says when we get here, if you gave every one of us a banner to wave, everybody's banner would say the same thing. It would say, you don't understand, my case is different. You don't understand, my case is different. There is something that happens, though, when that guy hears that physical allergy, mental obsession, terrible cycle, hopeless state of mind and body, where all of a sudden you can see him going, I've never heard this stuff before, and I've been sitting in AA meetings for years, What if I'm just a garden variety alcoholic? That drives everything, because there's something that step 1 drives everything. It drives me through the rest of the work, and I hope to talk about some of that a little bit later. But I want to get sober. Because I came to AA in '84, and in the early days I had a sponsor, and it was anybody sober up? Who sobered up in the '80s? It was an interesting time in Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a ton of discussion meetings. There was a ton of 12 and 12. There was some big book. Joe and Charlie were single-handedly bringing the big book back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, almost single-handedly back then. And I love those guys, the heroes of mine. I went to 3 Joe and Charlie big book studies and I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me, but this probably doesn't happen in Louisiana. But I got what they call a confirmation bias in my brain. That's a big word for what it means is, when I listen to stuff and when I read stuff, I'm not always looking for new information. I'm looking for ways that I'm already right. You know, so my sponsorship lineage, we work a lot with this thing called the set aside prayer. You know, where and it's just something to the effect of, God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about the steps, the program, the fellowship, myself, even you, God, so that I could have a new experience. Please help me to see the truth. Something like that, because otherwise, I read the book, I missed a lot in my early approaches to the steps, and I don't even really know how. I mean, because, I would read the book, and I think what I would do was this is the way it goes for me, is I read the book, and I go, oh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, this is that part where it says, oh, yeah, Jay Walker, oh, boy, and then, and I go, oh, yeah, you can't tell me anything about this. Look here, I've already got that highlighted and underlined, but I do the set-aside prayer, and new stuff just leaps off the page at me all the time. Try it. What happened, though, was I come in and I missed an awful lot, and I said, wound up, I gotta get moving here, because a lot has happened in 28 years of sobriety. In my first years of sobriety, I worked a program like the problem was alcohol. I didn't know that, but I was working that program, I was coming to the meetings, and I was a meeting-making fool. You didn't have to tell me 90 meetings in 90 days. I was going all the time. I was going to AA barbecues. I had AA roommates. I'm dating AA girls. I'm working with AA guys, the whole thing. I was a fellowshipping fool, but I missed an awful lot. And I worked the steps like alcohol was the problem, and what happened was I hit the wall in sobriety several times. I hit the wall at 4.5 years, blew up a marriage, got a child support payment going out, and then I pulled back and I waited the appropriate amount of time before I got into another relationship, 2 weeks, and went into another relationship, and 2.5 years later, I've blown up that relationship, and I got another child support check going out. And my Wednesday nights and every other weekends are getting real busy, and I heard a girl in AA one time said that now when she meets a new guy, she goes, is this really the guy I want my children to spend their Wednesday nights and every other weekend with? Woo! But I'm hitting the wall in sobriety, and I didn't know what the problem was, I think I'm doing AA. I think I'm doing rigorous honesty. I think I'm doing this stuff. And I'm going to the meetings, and I didn't know the problem. And that guy, I was doing what we call meeting-based sobriety. And I didn't know it, but that guy. I'm the guy that was in the meeting going, well, screamed at the wife on the way out of the house today, and smacked one of the kids out, and kicked the dog, and burned out of the driveway, and got to work 2 hours late, and looked at an hour of internet porn online, and then played some poker, and then I left work an hour early and got a half gallon of Bluebell ice cream on the way home. But I didn't drink today, and by God, that makes me a winner. They're like, kind of makes you a Nimrod, pal. But that's kind of the way I was rolling. And I was saying, and believe me, you take alcohol and outside issues out of my life, things are getting a lot better. And I didn't know it, but some of the gifts of sobriety were what was pulling me away from AA. I had a business and a family and money and kids and some of that sort of thing. But what happened was I started experiencing the bedevilments in sobriety. The bedevilments are on page 52 in our big book. And these happened to me in sobriety. It says we were having trouble with our emotional. We were having trouble. This microphone's giving me double vision here. We were having trouble with our personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. I wasn't too happy at work, let's just say that. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution to these bedevilments more important than some of this other stuff they've been talking about? I didn't know what the problem was. It turns out the book takes a big right turn on page 60, and I missed it for 17 years. I didn't know it for a long time. And what happened for me was I'm going along. Mark Houston used to say, how do you know what you don't know? That's one that'll give you a brain cramp if you think about it too much. But I really had no idea what I was missing. And I'd gotten into this marriage, the third one. Now, I should keep in mind, Katie and I are best friends this whole time. 20 years, we were like brother and sister, literally. Like, she was like my kid sister. There was no flirtation, no nothing. She was really one of the best friends, still is one of the best friend I've ever had. But this time she was married. I was at the wedding. I knew her kids since they were born. I was Uncle Charlie the whole time her kids were growing up. In fact, when her daughter got pregnant with our first grandchild, we hadn't been together that long, and she goes, "So what's it going to be now? Grandpa, Uncle Charlie?" You know, I mean. But anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with anything. But in this, I got in this relationship that I went through what I like to call a flat period in my sobriety. Looking back on it, it was untreated alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't know it. And and I'd gotten into this marriage that was dishonest with a woman that had a tremendous amount of money, and it was a life of privilege, and had a lot of shine on it. We had a penthouse in Manhattan and a beach house in the Hamptons, and I stayed in Austin, and all this. But there was just a ton of dishonesty on my part. And I don't like brag. I'm not here to brag about that. I'm talking about where untreated alcoholism took me. But I mean, it wasn't awful, but it just wasn't. I mean, anyway. One night we chartered a plane to fly from East Hampton back into Manhattan to go to dinner with some people, and it was the end of the weekend, long weekend, and so we chartered. It was going to be a fun. I had some people from out of town, let them see Long Island from the air and everything, and we're flying back in, and we get in this little 6-seater Cessna, and I'm in the co-pilot seat. I'm not a pilot, but it was a charter plane, and then there's the pilot over here, and my wife and the dog were behind me, and this other couple's in the back of the plane, and we take off, and we get up out over the Peconic Bay, just about where the Long Island forks, and we're going along, and I'm looking around, and it's really quiet, and it's like we're in a glider, and I've got headphones, the same as the pilot has, so I take those headphones and I put them on. Let me tell you, what you don't want your charter pilot to be saying when you put your headphones in is, "Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on," and I'm going, and they come over the radio and they go, "You're cleared to Gabreski." And there's an airport right there at 10 o'clock, and I can see the runway lights, but we're not going to make it. He goes, "You don't understand. I've lost engine power. I can't make land. I'm going to have to ditch." And I'm like, "What?" I mean, I'm a gambler my whole life. What are the odds of that? I mean, the first time I ever charter a plane in my life, we're going to put it down at night in the water. So he says, "Brace for impact." Well, turns out I didn't know how to do that, and so we're approaching the water, and then we hit the water, and I mean, it's like splashdown at Six Flags times 100. There's spray and water everywhere and noise, and the windshield comes in and the cowling comes off, and then absolute silence. And I remember thinking, my God, I think we're okay. And right about that time, I got to tell you, this wasn't a very good airplane. Really crappy boat, I mean, about the time I thought, oh my God, I think we're okay, I feel something on my knee, and it goes up like that. And by the time I'm trying to get the door open, the door won't open. And then I need some air. Well, so I go up to get some air, and there's nothing but water and the roof of the plane. And I remember thinking, so that's it. That's it. I died today in this blankety-blank airplane. And I go back underwater, and that door comes open, and I'd like to tell you my thoughts were of others, but as soon as I felt my feet come free, I remember thinking, I'm out. And I went up and got some air, and I came back down and pulled my wife out. And I went back down and got the dog out, and the pilot popped out on the other side, and that other couple popped through a window. And we were on CNN with Anderson Cooper, live from the headlines with Anderson Cooper and all that stuff. But the reason I tell it is because a story like that will make you look at things kind of differently, because I'd been about to say something about that marriage for a while, but I'd get up there and it's Thursday, I'm not going to say anything Thursday, and then come Saturday, you go, I'm going home tomorrow. There's no use blowing up the world, I just go back to Austin and we'll worry about it later. And that went on for 8 years. And but after this plane crash, I remember I made some huge changes in my life. And but one of the things that became obvious to me, I called up John Henry one time, this old timer in Austin. I said, John Henry, I'm so self-centered. I can't even be in a conversation with anybody. I know this probably doesn't happen to any of you guys, but I would just have to. I was aware that I just had to force myself to be in a conversation with anybody. I'd have to go, how are the kids? And act like I give a flip about the answer, because I don't. All I care about is me and me and me and me. Turns out it's mentioned in our big book, but I'd missed it for a long time. When I said the big book takes a big right turn on page 60, I missed it for 17 years. And I get back in the book, and I'm studying the book, and on page 60, after that A, B, and C, it says, it says being convinced of what? A, B, and C. It says being convinced we were at step 3. So it's saying that A, that we're alcoholic, could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. And that's where, for some reason, people have started chanting like a bunch of high school kids at summer camp. I don't know where this came from. I've got to do a little thing on the chanting in AA. It comes out of the treatment centers. It's well-intentioned. But, when I got here in 83, it was like at the end of the Lord's Prayer, they'd say, keep coming back, And they go, oh, okay. And the next thing you know is, keep coming back, it works. And then it was, keep coming back, it works. If you work it and you're worth it, so work it. And you're like, oh, for God's sakes. And then it's God could and would if he were sought. And then next thing you know, it's principles before personnel. And I'm like, all I'm saying is that it's optional. If you're new, you don't have to do it. It's something, but if the new guy hears something in AA 3 or 4 times, he's going to think it's AA, right? So it turns out, amen is a really kick-ass way to end a prayer. We're the only ones that take the Lord's Prayer and think we got to put a little flavor on it. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying it's optional. At the end of this meeting, we will have the Lord's Prayer with optional chanting at the end. So I'm reading the book, and it says, being convinced, we were at step 3, and we would turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And then it asks what I think is a fair question for a new guy to ask. What do you mean by that, and what do we do? Because I think one of the biggest mistakes being made in Alcoholics Anonymous is taking a guy right from, are you alcoholic, without laying that out for him. Do you believe there could be a power that could help you? And if he says yes, popping him down on his knees and doing the 3rd step prayer. Because it's all well-intentioned. That's what my first sponsor did. It wasn't perfect. Our approach to the steps wasn't perfect. In fact, a lot of times I like to say, it was barely enough to save my life. And the other thing I want to say as a qualifier is don't wait till you can do this stuff perfectly to sponsor anybody. It is my firm belief in my heart that if the sponsor and the sponsee are both giving it their best shot, God takes up a lot of slack in that relationship. So get in there and sponsor people and get you a sponsor and ask them what to do if you don't have one. But that thing where it says, what do you mean by that? And then it says the first requirement. I missed that for 17 years. It says the first requirement is that I be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. I remember looking at that going, my God, not only have I never been convinced of that, that sentence never touched me. I went right from willing to believe to the 3rd step prayer, writing inventory. If you do that, you miss this whole body of work from pages 60 to 63. It's really not very important. It's just the root of our problem and the basis of our recovery for the rest of our lives. Other than that, skip it. goes on to talk about what we mean by selfish and self-centered. And I don't know, I mean, Katie does a beautiful job of doing the third step, and we get to do a sponsorship workshop at 3:30 this afternoon. You're in for a treat at 8 o'clock tonight. I got to tell you, I'm a little biased, but Katie's talking tonight, and she's a little bit like getting a drink from a fire hose sometimes. But you won't have any trouble figuring out where she's coming from. You know, I mean, I had a guy come up to me one day and he goes, "Is Katie mad at me?" I went, "Oh, brother, let me tell you, you'll be real clear when Katie's mad at you." But she's wonderful. She's the best day I've ever seen. And sometimes my best move in sponsorship is when I'm talking to one of my sponsees and go, "You want to talk to Katie?" You know, I mean, it's like, you really want Charlie Parker to be your relationship sponsor? You know, but I get into this work at a whole new level after this stuff, and I had a brand new awakening in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started getting in the work. We got a friend of mine checked into treatment that had been taking 125 Vicodin a day on a little relapse, and we got him checked into treatment, and he got hooked up with this one-eyed guy from Kerrville, Texas, down there that some of you may know, Chris R., and his twin brother is my sponsor now. I started working with Myers. We started doing this stuff at a different level, and then one day Katie and I wound up at a big book study with Mark Houston and this other guy. I'll never forget it. Mark Houston changed my life. I should tell you, I'm a biker and a competitive shotgun shooter and a big guy. And I'm liable to cry like a little girl in a pink dress up here when I start talking about Mark Houston, because I mean, he passed away unexpectedly 3 years ago at the age of 63. But I mean, he came into our lives, and we went to this workshop, and I will never forget it. I mean, we sit up close, and we were sitting there, and I mean, I felt a connection at the moment he started talking, and he was talking about and at one point, I remember leaning over to Katie, and I said, "My God, what book is he reading from?" You know, because I'd never heard half the stuff he was saying, and it was coming right out of this book. I mean, so we had this new experience in the third step. I got to get moving because there's just an awful lot to finish up with. But we sit down with Mark, and Mark wound up moving to Austin. He became my sponsor. And every Thursday night at the house, we had a meeting called the Common Solution. And it was Mark Houston on one end of the table, me on the other, and all of my sponsees. And it's the best day I've ever been involved in. Every time the door opened on Thursday evening and Mark walked in, I knew it was a big deal. Most of my sponsees didn't, but I knew it was a big deal, you know, that we were very fortunate to have him not only come to that meeting, but making a priority of it. And we started working these steps at a level that I'd never experienced before. He sat down with us, and he started talking about where you're at in the amends process. And we all sat down and we made up amends cards. And we started, you know, actually going out and making amends to people we had harmed. And we talked about it, about our approach. And now, you know, a lot of times, you know, my first conversation with the sponsee now when he's calling me is, where you at in the circle and triangle? You know, fellowship, service, the steps. You know, have you made any approaches on your amends lately? And we're about actually getting out and making direct amends. We're about doing the 10th step as you go through the day and calling each other with spot check inventories and that sort of thing. Doing evening review, doing morning meditation, and actually getting out and having a real message to carry. I mean, I don't know. I go out to the Austin Recovery once a week and talk to the guys. We got the primary purpose group we started 7 years ago in Austin, because I went up to the one in Dallas, and I remember thinking, we need a meeting like this in Austin, you know, where we're studying the book line by line. And we got over 200 people coming on Thursday nights now. And to watch the ripple effect through the Austin AA community is unbelievable, you know. I mean, I don't know which is better. Being able to have a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, or being able to show somebody else how to have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. There was a time when if a guy came to me and asked me to sponsor him, I'd go, well, yeah, sure, I know I'm not supposed to say no, so go home and take this book and read, just read the whole damn thing, you know, and in my heart, I'm kind of knowing that I hope he doesn't call me because I didn't have a whole lot to offer him. I got a message of depth and weight now, and it didn't come because of any credit of mine. It came as a result of getting with people like Myers and Chris. I want to really thank the Tapers for being here, because a whole bunch of my experience in the last 10 years of sobriety and getting on fire with this deal has come from driving around listening to CDs in my truck of people that know more about this stuff than I do. I listen to Bob D. I listen to Chris R. I listen to Myers R. Listen to Mark Houston. Listen to, Chris Schroeder out of New Jersey. These guys have changed my life, and it's a level of this program. And now my conversations with sponsees most of the time are about their sponsees. I get 10-step calls, I get inventory, but most of the time they're calling me saying, I got a guy that says this, where would you go with that? And I go, well, I'd go to this. I'd go to, where did you set the ball rolling? Where did you, make decisions based on self? Because I just got, in the hour I have left here this morning, for you smokers, I'm just kidding. I'm almost done. But, this whole thing about self is, I didn't know what the problem was, and I wish I had more time to go into the self piece, but it's all we talk about now. My sponsees probably think I've only read 3 pages out of the big book, because all we do is 60 to 63. Where'd you make decisions based on self? Where'd you set the ball rolling? And that sort of thing. And, are you really not a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Are you not a victim of the delusion that you can rest satisfaction and happiness if you can just manage well? It's all in that stuff. And I mean, Chuck Chamberlain, when I say I didn't know what the problem was, Chuck Chamberlain used to tell a story about a guy that was afraid of dogs. And all his life he'd been afraid of dogs. And one day he was doing inventory on it, and he remembered that when he was a kid, one of the neighborhood dogs had bit him, so he'd been running. But then when he inventoried it further, he remembered that he'd been chasing one of the neighborhood girls across her lawn when her dog came out and bit him. And he said, now, all my life, I'd been chasing women and running from dogs, and dogs never were my problem, That's the way it was for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been working a program like the problem was alcohol, and alcohol never was the problem. Alcohol was the only thing I ever found that would ease the discomfort of a life based completely on selfishness and self-centeredness. I almost missed it. I assume we're all Dallas Cowboy fans here. I know we're in the Who Dat Nation, I like to say that, but I'm a lifelong Dallas Cowboy fan. And I've been a Dallas Cowboy fan since they were good, and the reason I say that is because one time I was sponsoring this guy, and he calls me up and he says, my family's got a skybox at Texas Stadium. He says, do you want to go see the Philadelphia game this Monday night? And I said, yes, I do. And we met, and we go into this special little parking lot, and we go up this quiet little escalator into this civilized little hallway, and we go into this room with a glass wall, and there's the field, and you got waiters coming in with cookies and buckets of ice and all this stuff. And I'm looking around, and I don't know whether to be excited about being in this skybox or to be pissed off about having sat in the cheap seats for 20 years. That was exactly my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. It turns out there was a level of AA going on that I had never experienced. I'd been sitting around in those discussion meetings thinking I knew what AA had to offer, and I'd never stuck a toe in the water. If you're new here today, we love you. We welcome you. We want you to become a part of our fellowship. We hope you stay sober and stay with us. I think there's plenty of message out there for the newcomer in AA, though. I'm talking to the guy that's been around for a while. I'm talking about the guy that's got 3 years, 5 years, 15, 25 years of sobriety, and you're not feeling it. There's always somebody in the room that when we're all laughing, they're not laughing because they don't think anything's funny. I'm here to tell you it's still available, and it's available as a result of doing the work right out of the big book with somebody who's done the work right out of the big book. Get with that annoying big book thumper in your meeting and go to him and say, show me what to do. I had to go to Myers and say, Myers, I want to go through the steps the way you guys go through the steps. It has lit me on fire. I almost missed it. If I'd have died in that plane crash, I would have missed it. If you'd have come up to me and told me when I had 17 years of sobriety, Charlie, what's going to change your life and set you on fire is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous worked right out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have told you you're crazy. I would have told you I know what AA has to offer. I've been in AA for 17 years. I'd never stuck a toe in the water. All I'm telling you is it's still available. And in a moment of clarity, though, has no value if it's not followed by action. Get home, get with somebody. How much, our book says the most satisfying years of our existence lie ahead of us. I'm asking you to ask yourself, we believe in turning statements into questions in this book, and that's one of them where I go, is that your experience? Do you feel like the most satisfying years? The book doesn't say our lives kind of peter out around 25 years of sobriety. It says it just keeps getting better and better. And if that's not your experience, get with somebody and get into a different level of this work. My name's Charlie Parker. I'm an alcoholic.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.